What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. And joining me today, Chris Fedor, cleveland.com, Cavs beat reporter, and Jimmy Watkins, cleveland.com columnist. And we're coming to you guys after night one of the 2026 NBA draft. We all know coming into tonight's draft that the Cavs had the 29th overall pick in this first round, but they elected to move off of it. They traded it to the Sacramento Kings for the number 24 second round pick of tomorrow's draft, and then also the Kings 2032 second round draft. The Sacramento Kings were hungry to acquire Alex Caravan, the UConn's men's most winningest player in men's history for the UConn Huskies. Chris, what did you take away, or what are you hearing from the Cavs moving away from their first round pick? We talked about it on a recent podcast, wanted to get out of that salary capital and all of those different things. What is the importance of the Cavs making this move, and does this make it easier for them to trade out of the draft entirely, or is there someone that you have in mind for them to go get in day two?
I think it's a wait and see thing when it comes to trading out of the draft entirely. What's available to them with the 34th overall pick? How much do they value that particular player at 34 overall? What are the options that are available to them in a potential trade? Are the options available to them in this year's draft or next year's draft or the year after that or the year after that? So a lot of these things are fluid, but we talked about this on the podcast last night. We talked about this on a podcast leading into the draft, and I wrote about it for cleveland.com, just about this being a strong possibility because the last couple of days, the Cavs have explored a bunch of different options involving the 29th overall pick. And these are the kinds of things that second apron teams have to do. Look at the New York Knicks. Look at the way that they handled things tonight in the NBA draft, and the kind of salary savings that they're looking for because they're headed toward the second apron. Look at what the Denver Nuggets had to do when they got into the second apron a couple of years ago. Look at what the Boston Celtics had to do the minute that they went into the second apron. The second apron is very, very restrictive, and it causes you as an organization to sometimes make painful decisions. And you may want to keep somebody that you're not able to keep. You may want to draft somebody that you don't want to ultimately guarantee their salary. So I think when you look at the Cavs and just the way that they approached having the 29th overall pick, I think the first thing that we have to talk about is that my understanding is that a number of the guys that they were looking at 29 were in the same talent tier. They clustered them all together in the same talent tier, and there wasn't anybody still on the board at 29 that stood out from the rest from that standpoint. So they had to ask themselves, is there anybody here at 29 that we're willing to guarantee the contract of? Is there anyone here at 29 that we're willing to pay around $3 million annually? Is there anybody here at 29 that Kenny Atkinson's actually going to play as a rookie? You know what I mean? Like, you have the Cavs and they're competing for a championship, and they just went through this playoff run where they got to the conference finals, and Kenny Atkinson, he bumped Jalen Tyson, second-year player Jalen Tyson, who was a regular season contributor. He bumped him out of the rotation as the playoffs went along. Craig Porter Jr. couldn't get minutes in the playoffs, and he's been with this organization for how many years? Naquan Tomlin, another regular season contributor, didn't play in the playoffs except for really garbage time. So what was the 29th pick going to get in terms of playing time, in terms of opportunity? So do you really want to guarantee in the situation that the Cavs are in financially, they're asking themselves, do we really want to guarantee the contract of this rookie who is probably going to spend some time in the G League or not be in our every night rotation? Can we afford to do that in the salary cap situation that we're in? And I think if they would have liked a player enough at 29, somebody who like stood out from the rest of the pack, then they could have made a convincing argument to themselves. But by doing this, they drop down 5 spots. They don't have to guarantee the salary. They save some money. And in their mind, if they stay there at number 34, they're still picking from the same pool of players that they were looking at number 29.
Yeah, I wonder if they're going to make this pick.
Yeah, I mean, I'm told that they're still exploring the possibility of trading this pick.
Right, because I mean, that what it really does come down to is what Chris said near the beginning of his point is like, is Kenny Atkinson going to play any of these dudes? Like, I'm looking at a guy like Henry Visar, who, was top 20 on some people's boards and has interesting NBA skill set, can space the floor next to a Jared Allen or an Evan Mobley. The barrier for entry, I still feel like would be pretty high for him in the rotation, just because like there's some real defensive concerns there for all the stuff you like on offense. I think where and who and how are you guarding at the highest level, right? Is still a question for me. I think we can. There are guys on the board that are interesting prospects. I like Malik Thomas in a vacuum. I think he's a bucket. But like, if the Cavs are deciding on, spending a roster spot on one of these guys potentially, and they're already really cramped for rotation spots and roster spots as it is, I don't know. I'm just getting the vibe that they're not going to make this pick.
I think you mentioned some interesting names there, Jimmy. We talked about it on a recent podcast that the Cavs are going to continue to look at who are available, especially with this now number 34 overall selection, whether that be Isaiah Evans out of Duke, whether that be Henry Vasar out of UNC, whether that be Malik Thomas out of Arkansas. And of course, these are players that fell to the second round. So there's an understanding that they are not perfect players. They need to be molded and shaped. And obviously, Henry Vasar, who has more experience in college, doesn't have the same kind of leeway, have the same kind of runway to be molded. His game is kind of determined for him. But he has so many different upside factors to his game that allow him to be impactful, especially in a system that could potentially need him to be a backup role. Whether it comes to Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, we understand that Evan Mobley is still going to take over a majority of those 5-man minutes when they toggle that roster between for Kenny Atkinson's rotations. But then you also have Henry Vasar, who can step in and space the floor alongside Evan Mobley, help you do some more of that 5-out lineup kind of things. And I think that makes him a little bit more interesting for this Cavs team. He also has the height and the length that you would want, 6'11", and he's extremely mobile for his size, which fits well in my eyes next to Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. Then the other two, and Jimmy, I think you mentioned it well. These two guys are not necessarily within the prototypical or archetype of wing that the Cavs want, right? When it comes to Isaiah Evans, he's 6'5.5". We've had the conversation with fans about fans, how they want a bigger wing. And then Isaiah Evans is even on the shorter spectrum of this, being just 6'3". But these two guys do have intangibles, the fearlessness, the makeup that make them kind of coveted in this 34th overall selection space if they're still on the board for the Cavs. But Chris, I'm interested to get your thought process because there is the understanding that the Cavs could trade out. They could simply just not draft in the 2026 NBA draft. What is your feeling? What is your vibe that you're getting from the organization about what they might need? And is that simply not having a selection this year?
I don't know that they're looking at this as need-based. I don't think that they were ever looking at this as need based. And I think we have to go all the way back to a number of years ago. And I wrote this to all of our Cavs insiders on subtext at the very beginning of the night. It sounds kind of like elitist, but the Cavs don't need the draft anymore. They don't. Yes, it would have been nice to add a young player to help offset some of the bloated salaries that they do have. Yes, it would have been nice to bring in another team friendly, controllable player that you can put into your player development program and you trust Kenny Atkinson. And that's a big reason why he was brought here and all that kind of stuff. But this isn't 2018 anymore. This isn't 2019 anymore. We don't have to have these debates about Colin Sexton versus Kevin Knox versus Michael Porter Jr. We don't have to have these debates about Isaac Okoro versus Tyrese Halliburton versus Denny Avdia versus Devin Vassell. The Cavs, since Donovan Mitchell arrived in 2022, they have gotten themselves to a different place where the draft just doesn't have the same meaning as what it used to. Back then, it represented the only way out of a rebuild. Back then, it represented, hope and optimism for the future. Maybe a fresh start, maybe a new franchise pillar that this organization could build around. But now this team's competing for championships and they need playable depth. And a rookie is just not as playable. So I think it all kind of depends on who's available at number 34 and how much they value that particular player. I will say this, if we're talking about the 34th pick as opposed to the 29th pick, it's only 5 slots different, but it's a significant difference. For the Cavs, every decision is important. Every dollar, every cent is important in the financial situation that they're in. So it's just like easier to justify the flaws of some of these guys when you don't have to guarantee their contract, when you don't have to pay them $3 million annually, when you may, emphasis on may, these things become a negotiation now when we're talking about second round picks. It could be non-guaranteed. It could be partially guaranteed. It could be a two-way contract. And the Cavs are going to have at least one of those slots open, maybe 2 of those slots open. So it just becomes like easier to justify that selection and maybe deal with the perceived weaknesses of that player when you eliminate the fact that it's a second round pick as opposed to a first round pick. So I do think some of these guys would make sense from a Cavs perspective. Isaiah Evans can shoot the crap out of it. He can shoot on the move, catch and shoot. He brings constant movement to your offense. He's somebody who would seemingly thrive in a Kenny Atkinson type system. He's also very young and very wiry, and there are questions about him on the defensive end of the floor. As we talked about, Vassell is different than the other bigs that they have. And I do think that would be important. If he is still on the board at number 34, I think he'll get some consideration. I know that they were considering Malik Thomas at number 29 before they made the decision to trade out of that spot. So I think he would be in consideration. Shot 41% from 3-point range, competitive as hell, little bit wiry, doesn't have the prototypical size to be the 3-and-D type player, probably a little bit of a question about how efficient of a scorer can he be? How much volume does he need to actually be effective in your offense? But again, we're talking about the 34th pick. These guys are going to come with flaws. It might be that they don't have prototypical size. It might be in the case of Vassell that he's a drop big and only a drop big and he can't switch onto anybody. In the case of Isaiah Evans, he doesn't score at the rim. He doesn't do much at this stage of his development other than move around, create some gravity, knock down some threes. Emmanuel Sharp is a really rugged defender from Houston. If you're going to play for Kelvin Sampson, you're going to have to defend. You're going to have to compete. But, is he a point guard? Is he a shooting guard? If he's a shooting guard, he's 6'3". If he's a point guard, does he have the kind of handle? Does he have the kind of creation skills? So yeah, we're talking about flawed prospects for the Cavs that they would be looking at number 34, and then they have to determine, okay, is that guy worth the kind of salary that, or the kind of contract that we would have to give him? Or would it make more sense for us to drop further back in the second round? Would it make more sense for us to drop out of the second round completely and add more future draft capital? And that future draft capital could be used as an asset to get off of Dennis Schroeder's contract or something like that. So there are just so many different layers to every decision that the Cavs are going to make this offseason, next offseason, the following offseason. And they're in a situation where they have to consider all of these different factors at once, because the second apron leads to a bunch of different restrictions that you have as an organization. That's why no team wants to do it. That's why the Knicks are desperate to avoid it. Coming off a championship, by the way, they are desperate to avoid it, because it just makes things really, really tricky from a team building standpoint.
The other thing is that free agency, while the free agent classes are less deep than they used to be, and the good players usually don't make it there, or they make it there less and less often, the top of the crop guys.
Yep.
The guys that are there, because the cap environment is so punitive right now, that there's just not a lot of cap space teams. Like, you're probably going to find a few more, I don't know about valuable, but interesting, like minimum type players.
Yeah.
Than you would in years past. Like, that's kind of a newer reality that we're going with. Or if like the Cavs can, if the Cavs end up getting under the second apron, the BAE biannual exception, stuff like that. It's just another tool that you can throw at somebody that, and then again, that's a leg up that you can have on other teams who are in similar positions, but maybe all they have is a minimum contract to offer, right? So that's another thing to consider here. And that there does reach a point where it's just like if you trade back to, I don't know, past 40, like we talked about it going into the draft, NIL has kind of wrecked the second round in a lot of ways. Like I've been, gearing up for the draft, I've been listening to some of the experts who really go into it, and they're saying like they're having trouble filling out their entire big boards.
Yeah.
Because there are just so few players that they're intrigued by in the draft. So I would think that if the Cavs are going to grab somebody, it would be at 34 from this particular crop of guys. But like, I don't know. I think V-Star is probably the best fit. If it's a guard, again, I like Malik Thomas, but you already have Tyrese Proctor, who you're super excited about. You already have Craig Porter Jr., who you just picked up the fourth-year option on. Like, I don't know. There just might be better uses of that roster spot. I'm also curious. I don't know when this starts, but I know that in the second round, sometimes agents will call like this. This is how the Lakers got Bronny James. Agents will call around and say, "Hey, don't draft my guy," because
it's also how the Cavs got Tyrese.
There you go. Agents will call around and go, "Don't draft my guy because we think we have a better situation over here." And if I'm an agent for one of these guys who thought I was going in the first round and wants to have that kind of role somewhere else, even though I've fallen in the draft, I don't know that I'd be all that psyched about getting picked up by the Cavs right now. It's a healthy culture. They do a really good job of developing guys, but like your pathway to playing time is murky at best, and it's a long runway, and they're trying to save money. Like the negotiation would be if I'm, say I'm Malik Thomas and the Cavs call me up. I'm saying, okay, I'm not going to play very much. Can we make up with that with some more guaranteed money or something of that nature? And if I'm the Cavs, I'm like, well, I don't know if I want to do that either. So again, this is why I'm saying that just doesn't sound like to me they're going to make the pick, because there was someone who moved them to enough of a degree. I feel like they would have pulled the trigger at 29, and there were some guys on the board at 20, like Cole Pete, a guy that we discussed. There were some guys on the board there, and they just decided not interesting enough.
I think it's also important to remember that there's more to come even after the second round comes and goes on Wednesday, right? And the Cavs, as Chris has mentioned, are not only good at drafting, but finding and unearthing talent that nobody wanted in the draft, right? We think back to Matthew Dellavedova in 2013. He went undrafted. Dean Wade in 2019, he went undrafted. Craig Porter Jr. in 2023, he went undrafted. Naquan Tomlin went undrafted. Sam Merrill was the last pick in his draft, right? So finding different assets that the Cavs have been able to turn into rotation pieces, and although they haven't gotten exactly where they want to go, they reached the Eastern Conference Finals with a majority of these pieces still on the team. So I do think it's important to keep that reality in check, that although the draft is not as lucrative as many might have thought, and the Cavs and other teams may be struggling to fill out their big boards, I think it's important that the Cavs also keep an eye, and fans keep an eye on anybody that the Cavs are taking flyers on, and as well as Henry Vesar, as we've talked about on this podcast, being a decent fit, especially with the understanding that the Cavs need more front court depth, and two of their veteran minimum players, Larry Nance Jr. and we talk about all the guys that they've had come back, and Thomas Bryant as well, understanding that we do not know what they're going to do with those contracts as of now, and the likelihood that they bring those guys back is uncertain. So trying to find more depth and more cheap help is as important for this Cavs team as finding a home run hit, especially in this point in the draft.
And I think it's about finding playable guys. Who is your coach more likely to play? A second-round rookie at pick number 34, or a guy that you sign at the end of free agency on the veterans minimum? I think we know the answer to that question, don't we? We saw the answer to that question play itself out. And it doesn't mean that Kenny's never going to play these guys. If they draft somebody at 34, whether it's Vesar or Thomas, it doesn't mean that Kenny's never going to use him. But in what matters to this organization the most, those guys are just going to be cheerleaders. Tyrese Proctor was somebody that the Cavs were excited about. Somebody that they got at 49 for a variety of reasons. How much did he play last year as a rookie? Jalen Tyson, as a rookie, he was the 20th pick in the draft. How much did he play as a rookie? 453 total minutes. So, yeah, Kenny does explore his depth, and he does play more than 8 or 9 in the regular season, but he has shown himself to be more comfortable with veteran, experienced, seasoned players that are going to be in the right spots, that are going to follow the game plan, that are going to make the right reads, that are just going to have a deeper understanding of NBA level basketball. And that's what he has shown to be in his time as a coach. So if you're this front office and you're making these decisions, you have to keep in mind what the coach wants, what the coach needs, what the coach prefers. Yeah, there were some conversations between Kenny and front office members about Keon Ellis. Like, hey, dude, we went out at the trade deadline and we traded for Keon because we like him. Why the hell won't you play him? What? Come on. We gave up assets, real assets for this guy. You won't play him. Hey, we have invested in the growth and the development of Craig Porter Jr. Why won't you play him? We have Jalen Tyson here, a guy that you said is a future $20 million a year player. The Raptors look a lot like Jalen Tyson. The Detroit Pistons have guys that look a lot like Jalen Tyson. Why won't you play him? What? So, yeah, I think the Cavs have an understanding, this front office has an understanding that this is the kind of coach that they have. These are the kinds of guys that he prefers to be on the roster. These are the kinds of guys that he's willing to give consistent minutes to. And they're just not rookies. They're certainly not the 34th pick in this newly thinned out draft class. That, beyond the top tier guys, there just wasn't. There's a reason why a lot of the trade activity happened between 23 and 30, because that's where this draft got weakened by the guys who decided to go back to college and cash in on the NIL money. And the Cavs always knew that that was a possibility, but as they were going through this pre-draft process, it kind of hit them and it resonated with them a different kind of way. Like, hey, the guys that we thought the talent of player that we thought we were going to be looking at 29, 2 months ago is very, very different right now. And it's going to be harder for us to justify, making this pick. And I think they're going to have the same kinds of conversations. I don't know if they're going to have the same outcome, but I think they're going to have the same kinds of conversations tonight into tomorrow about what to do at number 34.
Just to be clear, this dynamic exists in essentially every organization across the NBA.
Yeah. It's not just a Kenny thing.
This is not a unique thing where there's no dissension here. This is just how it works. GMs, front offices, scouts, like talent. Their job is to find talent and traits and skills. Coaches like IQ and responsibility and that sort of thing. Things that just take time to learn, and particularly in the Kenny system. There's another of the many parallels between Kenny and the Warriors. It's so much read and react and play quick and read the game that, it just self-selects for guys who have been around the block. You can't know what you don't know. Right. And some of these young dudes, that's how guys get buried. That's how Jonathan Kuminga ends up getting traded from Golden State, right? He clearly, you can see in moments he has the talent. He'll have the game where he can go for 25 to 30, but his role wasn't that with the Warriors, and they would get frustrated when he wouldn't play within his role. And again, it's very hard to play within a role when you are your whole life the best player everywhere you've been. These are normal pieces, areas of friction for young players as they come into any professional sport, for that matter, but particularly basketball, when there's so much freedom and the roles can be blurry sometimes. This is normal. This is a normal thing that, to draw another parallel, this is why Michael Malone and Calvin Booth both got fired from the Denver Nuggets, because Calvin Booth was like, hey, I'm bringing you guys that we need to develop for down the road. Michael Malone's like, dude, if I don't win these games today, I'm going to get fired. It's the natural rub of things. Front office looks big picture. Coach looks, how do we win today?
And here's the thing too, if we're talking about 34 and what they could potentially do there, look, if Vesar comes off the board, you're looking at just a glut of guards. And they all fill the same general position, and they're all, undersized wings, or they play the 2/3, or maybe the 1/2 in terms of, the position. Is that something that the Cavs really need? Is that something that they really need to add to this roster? Now, look, as they spin it forward and they think about the future, there is a decision that they have to make on Dean Wade. There's a decision that they have to make on Dennis Schroeder and his contract. Max Strus is in the final year of his contract. So you could kind of tell yourself that one of these guys is more towards the future of that, more insurance, more depth, more protection. Convince yourself that Richie Saunders has Max Strus-like qualities, right? Convince yourself that Malik Thomas can do some of the things that some of these guys already on your roster can do. But, you know, if it's not a big that can play the 4-5 position, then it just feels like making a pick just for the sake of making a pick. And I don't know that the Cavs are in that kind of situation.
All right, guys. Well, you know how I like to roll. As much as we like to cover things and give analysis and insight, we also got to give our takes on different situations and scenarios. And there may not be a bigger one than tonight's NBA draft. And who was the biggest winner of the draft? And as much as we talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers still maybe moving back in the draft, maybe moving out of the draft entirely, who they might pick, I'm looking around and thinking that the entire NBA is trying to get stronger and trying to, as Chris said, remove themselves from the second apron as quickly as possible, or even from getting into the second apron. So the first overall pick, AJ Debonza, we know he went to the Washington Wizards. Do you guys think that him being selected number one, getting to play alongside Trey Young, Anthony Davis, Alex Sarr, Keyshawn George, does that move you at all in what the Wizards are building and creating, as much as they were one of the worst teams in the Eastern Conference and in the NBA, bar none? Do you think that elevates them to a play-in team caliber, or are we still just looking at what the OKC Thunder are building out in the Western Conference by drafting Ade Mara and Bennett Sturritz? Because I keep thinking about what Sam Presti's doing, and every button he's pushing becomes even more impressive to me.
I mean, you talk about Washington, but you always do the ... to a point, right? I mean, we're the Cavs here, and we're having this conversation. And if they're looking at it, they're not worried about the Washington Wizards the same way that they're worried about, how do we beat the Knicks? How do we compete with the Boston Celtics? How do we beat the Detroit Pistons if they make additions in the offseason that are really, really smart, that help, give them more shooting, give them a secondary playmaker alongside Cade Cunningham? Those are the teams that, if you're the Cavs and you're the highest payroll in the NBA and you're one of the teams in the second apron and you have legitimate championship aspirations and you just made a trade for James Harden in February, you're not worried about the Wizards. You're just not. You're not worried about the Chicago Bulls. You're wondering what Miami's going to look like when this is all said and done with Giannis and other stuff, right? You're wondering what Philadelphia might look like with Mike Gansey making decisions to put around Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey and things along those lines. But yeah, I mean, I think Oklahoma City stands out because that's one of the teams that we're doing a Cavs podcast. We're covering the Cavs. We have to worry about Oklahoma City. We have to think about Oklahoma City through the lens of how do they and the moves that they make impact the Cavs' chances of potentially winning a championship if they were to see that team in the finals. We have to look at the Spurs the same kind of way, right? We have to look at the Denver Nuggets, I would say, the same kind of way. And to me, Oklahoma City is a standout every single draft because they just make smart decisions. But one of the things that they were going to have to deal with this offseason is some potential losses. Aaron Wiggins already, Lou Dort maybe, Isaiah Joe maybe, Isaiah Hartenstein maybe, all of these kinds of things. And look, rookies are not those guys. But if we're talking about, finding guys in the lottery that may be able to help you or make it a little less painful to lose some of those guys, what Oklahoma City was able to do certainly helps that. So they just continue to make smart decisions all the time. And one of the things that they need is just a big dude, a big, strong dude to deal with Wemby. And they got the biggest, strongest dude in the draft, who everybody said in the pre-draft process was built in a lab to deal with Wemby. And the NBA just let Oklahoma City have that guy. Here you go.
And it could potentially save them I
Tons
mean,
of money.
tens of millions of dollars. If Ade Mara now or even later gives Thunder the security to feel like they can move off Isaiah Hartenstein, like that's a huge windfall for them because they're Shea, Chet, J Dub, those bills are coming due.
Oh,
Those
yeah.
extensions are going to kick in, and that's the second apron game, and it kind of worked out that obviously OKC, when they made the trade to get all the picks for Kawhi and Paul George, they didn't know how much more important draft picks were going to be right there. It's just like the lifeblood of a small market team. They were stacking them because they needed them, and you want flexibility, all those sorts of things. But it just so happens that there's never been a better time to be stacking draft picks the way they are, and they're doing it masterfully. They are finding players that ahead of time that fit the archetypes of roles that they may have to fill down the road. Like, I don't know who exactly you look at. Like, Bennett Sturge isn't the defender that Lou Dort is. Obviously,
No.
few guys are, but dude can pass, dribble, and shoot, and that's one way to stay on the court in an NBA playoff setting. Not this year. Not this year. He's probably going to spend a lot of time in their G League affiliate, but as an Isaiah Joe replacement, I can see it. Like Isaiah Joe plus, like he's got Bennett Sturts has more, shake off the dribble to his game and better play. He's got better playmaking ability than Isaiah Joe too. So that's really smart. I really liked Darren Peterson. Red flags and all. I love a dude who can shoot. I think that's a really nice way to like ingratiate yourself into the NBA, even like while you're learning all the stuff that it takes while you're learning to read the game and add to your ball handling package and all that sort of stuff. I think Utah and Peterson, I understand all the red flags. I don't love that. I don't love the creatine explanation. I don't know that I buy it, but I love the player independent of all that stuff, and I think he landed in a pretty good place for him because not only does Utah have, I think Utah will shield him. Like we won't be talking a ton about Darren Peterson. There won't be a ton of pressure on him to be that guy right away because it's Utah, but also like that team's good. Like Utah is the kind of team I'm looking at them, not Washington, as a team. Like, is that like a play-in team next year? Like,
could they be Charlotte?
Keontae George, Darren Peterson, Jaren Jackson Jr., Lauri Markkanen, like they're rolling out dudes on top of dudes on top of dudes, and then like their bench is rolling in lottery picks. There's a lot of talent on that team, and Will Hardy's a really good coach. I just think that their young pieces fit together really nicely, and if Peterson hits the way that I think he can, like they are going to be humming for a long time.
The other variable involving Utah is that they may actually play Lauri Markkanen past the All-Star break because they'll let him play past the All-Star break because, the motivation for tanking has been ripped away by Adam Silver and this decision that they've made to change the lottery structure. So they may actually play good players in the fourth quarter and play guys after the All-Star break rather than taking all their good players and saying, hey, man, like, go get nose surgery. Or like, hey, you can't play in March or April because you're too good and you're going to help us win too many games. Like that level of motivation is just not going to be there for Utah the same kind of way. So I think they're obviously going to rise up the standings just organically because of that.
More winter ball lovers, like just like the influx of high level talent at the top part of this draft. I'm trying to figure out who among these teams don't have a player that they would point to and say this is a foundational guy for us right now. Like Washington's got Devonta now, Peterson with Utah, Boozer in Memphis, Caleb Wilson in Chicago, we'll see what happens with the Clippers. For now, they still have Kawhi Wagler's interesting too, obviously. Mikal Brown Jr., you kind of got to squint at, but the upside is there. I like everyone seems to like A-Cup, so the Kings, that's at least, if you're a Kings fan, you have someone to point to and watch every night. Like,
I've got a team who doesn't have that guy.
Who would that be? The Bucks?
The Bucks.
Yeah. Braden
Jimmy
Berry
Haslam's
count.
Bucks.
But yeah, a lot of good talent in the league, so it'll be fun to watch.
All right, gentlemen. Well, as I mentioned at the beginning, day one of the NBA draft has now come and gone, and the Cleveland Cavaliers sat out once again. But we'll have to wait and see what they do on night two, as they currently have the number 34 overall selection. Whether or not they'll move out of the draft entirely, whether or not they'll make a pick that they think can help them as they have championship aspirations for the 2026-2027 season is still to be determined. But until then, with all that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. This is the only way you can have daily conversations with all of us to get our insight, our knowledge on the Cavs and what is going on behind the scenes with the NBA draft and everything this summer. As we mentioned, there's so many more moves to come, but the only way to get this information directly to your phone is signing up for a 14-day free trial or visiting cleveland.com/Cavs and clicking on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. Thank you for joining us.